we go. This is what we'll cover in this talk. How California natives are different from other landscape plants. We'll cover the things that you consider when you're choosing an irrigation type. By irrigation type, we would be talking drip or spray. And then we'll be talking about how to determine how much water the plants need at any given time. Okay, so California native plants. Oops. I usually, when I give these presentations, I'm usually pacing about here and there, and this one's a little different because I'm being filmed, so I'm going to try to be a good girl and stick to my spot. California natives they're active in the winter. And then they grow really actively into the spring, and as the summer starts approaching, they start going dormant. And this is very different from a lot of the other plants that we have in our landscapes. They are really kind of getting going when the summer comes. All right, and so by midsummer, they are semi-dormant to dormant, many of California natives. And then a lot of the natives actually respond to no water by going dormant. They'll drop their leaves. Anybody notice that the buckeyes are dropping their leaves already out in the regional parks? Okay. All right. So I bet you didn't know this, but you're actually going to take a test now. So what I would like you to do is I'd like you to use your intuition here, because figuring out how much water any given plant needs, it's really kind of a moving target. And this is why in the schools of architecture and horticulture, landscape horticulture, it's why irrigation isn't really taught all that much, if at all. And it's because scheduling and how much water a plant needs is totally a moving target. Because the amount of water that a plant needs really depends on the weather. And does that change every day? Yeah, okay. It depends on whether the plant is a low water use plant, a medium water use plant, or a high water use plant. So in other words, is it adapted to dry summers? And most California natives are, except for the ones that are from the riparian areas, the ones that are used to having their feet wet all year round. And then it depends on the size of the plant. And is that always changing? Yes. So we have two of the three factors are always changing, like daily. And so it's a moving target. But we do have some tools that we can use to try to get us in the ballpark. All right. So what I'd like you to do, if you have something to write on, is I'm going to ask you to write down for each of these plants. It's going to be 3 plants. I'm going to ask you to write down how much water per week you think this plant needs. Okay? So the first one we're talking about is a Dudleya. It's got a 2-foot diameter. Okay? How much water does this plant need in mid-July? Just write down a number. A Dudleya in mid-July. How many gallons per week? Now let's talk about early September, since that's where we are right now. How many gallons per week will this 2-foot diameter Dudleya need in early September? Write the number down. Okay, next plant, Ceanothus. This one has a 5-foot diameter, so this is a pretty mature plant. By the way, the Dudleya is classified as a very low water use plant, if you didn't know. Okay? And now we're at Ceanothus, which is low water use. And we'll talk about how those are determined a little bit later. But in the meantime, we have a 5-foot diameter Ceanothus. how many gallons per week would you say that it needs in the middle of July? Just write that number down. Now, how many gallons in early September? Gallons per week. Okay, last plant. Everybody says heuchera. I say heuchera. We have a heuchera that is 2 feet in diameter. This is a moderate water use plant, generally a shade plant. How many gallons per week will this plant require in mid-July? Just go ahead and write down your number. And then write down the number for early September. And then a little bit later in the talk, we'll actually have the numbers there as to what the answers are. All right. Here we go. All right. So we have another really serious challenge when we talk about irrigating landscape plants, whether they're California natives or not. And that is the fact that irrigation really was developed for monocultures. And monocultures mean one kind of plant. Irrigation was originally developed for cash crops, which is agriculture, and what would be another cash crop that's not agriculture? Flowers. Golf courses, turf grass on golf courses. So both of those examples are monocultures. And so our irrigation was developed to spray the same kind of plant. So you see what I'm getting at here? How landscapes are different than that? That the irrigation technology having been developed for one kind of plant at a time, because that water just sprays out at the same rate, the same frequency, the same. So when we compare the two in agriculture and for golf courses, these two are the same, really. We have one type of plant. We have the same age, same size, same soil, same microclimate, same, okay? When we come to the landscapes where we are trying to water our plants with this technology, and we have different types of plants, different ages, different water needs, different sizes, different soil, different. So we're taking a technology that was made for one thing and trying to apply it to another. Okay? So that is why I handed out to everybody, and I said this is the sensory accompaniment to this talk, because I talk drip. When we're talking plants, especially different plants, we mainly talk about drip. Because with drip, you can say, this ceanothus needs this many gallons a week, I'll give it this amount of water. This heuchera needs this many gallons a week, I'll give it this much water. And you can run those in the same zone at the same time. So generally, we wouldn't be putting ceanothus and heuchera together. Sorry about that. Sherry's going, is she really putting ceanothus and heuchera in the same zone? Sorry about that. So let's say it's Dudleya and ceanothus together. So, wow, that idea just flew out of my head. Okay, it'll come back later. So you see the point here, right? So we talk about drip. The mantra for the past several years has been spray the lawn, drip the plants. Spray the lawn, drip the plants. Yes, drip is challenging. It can be very challenging. But it is the absolute best way to water your plants in the irrigation season. Okay? So you folks are really on the cutting edge of where we should be going in California, in this dry state of California. You're on the cutting edge because you're interested in California natives, which are adapted to dry summers. So you're really on the cutting edge of really what we need to be doing. Because they're adapted to dry summers, they're used to, they get their water in the late fall through the winter, and then it stops in the spring, and then they're good, they're groovy, right? They're adapted to this. Most of our landscape plants are not. If it showed up in your yard without you going to the nursery and buying it, chances are it's adapted to that place that it showed up. Say some plants will grow out of sidewalk cracks. Do you need to water or fertilize those plants? So we go out and we find these beautiful plants and we bring them into our yard. So now we've got the challenge of watering them and watering them properly, because the question for so many years has always been, how should I water this garden? And what we're trying to get people to realize is that that's not the question we should be asking. The question we should be asking is, how do I water this plant? Okay, how much water does the plant need? How much water does each plant need? And this is something that you can figure out. That's why I asked you to look at those plants and intuitively try to figure out, or just intuit, how much water it needed. And I think you're going to surprise yourself how close you are in your answers a little bit later on. All right. So when we're thinking about choosing a type of irrigation, I had said before, spray the lawn, drip the plants. One of the things about spray is when you first plant a garden and the plants are less than a foot tall, great, the pop-ups come up, spray comes on, everything's fine. After about 6 months, what happens? Blocked sprinklers, maybe? Yeah. So a lot of times people will say, well, drip doesn't wash off the leaves of the plants. And yeah, in the regional parks in the Bay Area, does anything wash off the leaves of the plants?
Rain.
Does it rain in the summer in the Bay Area?
Not in the summer.
No, see, the California natives are used to getting washed when it rains in our rainy season. So there are many challenges around drip, and oftentimes, and if we have time this evening, we'll go through some of those and talk about some of those. But I really would like this evening to convince you to use drip. And we've written on here, I'm going to be teaching some drip classes for VOSCA, which is the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency. I'm going to be teaching these drip irrigation classes in Mountain View, Redwood City, and Sunnyvale. And that's where I'm going to show you how to do the stuff I'm talking about tonight. All right? And that'll just be about drip. It won't be about spray. So we wrote these up on here. At some point I'm going to be erasing it because I'll probably be using the whiteboard a little bit later. So these are free classes, by the way. And you can sign up on VOSCA's website, which is I think she's got it here. BAWSCA.org. VOSCA.org. Or you can call, there's a number here. Those of you in the back probably can't see the number. It's 650-349-3000.
May I ask? So
Yes.
are there differences in the different presentations that you're going to be doing, or are they all?
Let's see what the titles are. Drip irrigation design and install maintenance. Probably the Redwood City one, I will have some spray in there. And the Mountain View and Sunnyvale, I won't talk about spray, I'll just talk about drip. All right? And in the Redwood City, I'll talk about spray and drip, mostly drip. Okay. So when we're choosing the type of irrigation to use, this is a spray system. This actually, what's going on here now is actually illegal in California. We don't have the police out there writing tickets for this, but this is illegal. Our landscape ordinance went into effect on January 2010, and it made overspray and runoff illegal. Mainly because we weren't doing it ourselves, so they had to mandate it. Okay? So this is a spray system, sprinklers at the bottom of the slope. The reason this is happening is because sprinklers throw out that water at a really huge rate, a rate at which the soil can't accept it. So therefore you get the runoff. All right? So now we have another option here. You can't really see in this photo very well, but these are sprinklers, they're sprayers, but it's a different type of sprinkler. It's a water efficient sprinkler nozzle. These are MP rotators. The generic term is rotary nozzle. And it's a sprinkler that sprays out the water in fingers and they rotate. They rotate around. And it applies the water at a rate that the soil can kind of accept it. I say kind of because if you have clay soil, there has not been an irrigation invented yet that can deliver the water at the rate the clay soil can accept it. It hasn't been invented yet. We've gotten kind of close, but we're not there. May I erase this? Okay. Because I would like to make a point. How many of you have clay soil? Actually, I should say, how many of you don't have clay soil? Okay, 1, 2. Okay, that's usually what it is. And then sometimes people will say, well, I've amended my soil quite a bit. And a lot of you have amended your soil, I would think. Yeah, so you still have clay as your base. And so if you've amended it really, really nicely, then what we would say is that you have a clay loam soil. Now, clay loam, is this good, Steve? Are we okay?
Yeah.
All right. Clay loam will accept water at a rate of 0.17 inches per hour. Now, that number probably doesn't mean a heck of a lot to you guys, but I will tell you that those first sprinklers that we saw deliver the water at a rate of 1.80 inches per hour. Is there a prayer of that water going into that soil? No, especially on a slope. Especially on a slope, if there's not something that can catch it and keep the water there for a while. Okay, these sprinklers, the rotary nozzles, they deliver water at a rate of 0.39. Look, we're getting a lot closer here. I'm going to call this MP. And this is rotary nozzles, R-O-T-A-R-Y, rotary nozzles. 0.39 inches per hour. It's still more than double than what clay loam can accept, but we're getting close. The lowest precipitation rate or application rate, these are application rates, okay? This is application. This is sprinkler. And we like to call these fixed sprays. I'll just say fixed. That's what you saw in that first photo. That's fixed spray. That's the one that's 1.8. Yes, ma'am?
Are any of the micro sprays that connect to the drip lines as efficient as the
Okay. Micro sprays actually deliver water at a rate of higher than this, 1.8. It can actually go up to 4.0. So for micro sprays, and I'll show you later on in the presentation what you can incorporate if you absolutely have to put drip and spray together, okay? But micro sprays are very high, very, very high. It can go anywhere from 1.7 to about 4 inches per hour. It depends on how far it's shooting. If it's shooting a couple of feet, it's probably 4 inches an hour. If it's shooting 9 feet, it could be closer to this lower range. So the main thing here is that the water in sprinklers mainly is getting applied at a rate that the soil cannot accept it. All right? Runoff. All right. But with these efficient nozzles, the rotary nozzles, you have much more of a chance. Now you do want, well, we'll actually get to that. Here's another photo of these MP rotators. These are made by Hunter, of them actually working. I couldn't find one of them working on a native garden, sorry about that. And most of them were showing turf grass, them watering turf grass. This was the best I could do. All right, so if you choose spray, these are some of the things to watch out for. Now, as Sherry said earlier, this presentation will be available to you, okay? So there are a lot of slides in here that have information. You don't have to try to write it all down as quickly as you can because you will get this. This will be on the website and you can download it so that you have all of these things. All right. Make sure the pressure is correct. Yay. Thank you, Steve. Yes. This is really awesome. Because usually when I give these talks, I have a bunch of handouts, got like 8 or 9 pieces of paper, and people are leafing through their handouts. And by the way, I will be giving you guys some relevant handouts to put on the website as well. Okay? Okay. So the only one we actually handed you this evening was the irrigation resources, and that is because that's a really good one to have in paper, and you will have the electronic version of that as well, so that you can click the link. Okay. Make sure the pressure is correct. Now I'm just going to go through these fairly quickly because there are many concepts that I'd like to cover tonight. And really, a talk that's a little bit more than an hour, really, it's about concepts. I brought a whole bunch of show and tell stuff, and we could talk about nozzles and play with drip emitters and do all of that, but if you have the basic concepts here, you can at least start speaking the language. All right. Make sure none of the sprinklers are blocked. And then make sure the sprinklers actually apply the water at a slow rate, like the rotary nozzles do. Rotary nozzles are really good for that. If you have sandy soil, those of you who raised your hand and said you don't have clay soil, if you have sandy soil, use those sprinklers that blast, okay? And you may not be able to use drip if you really have sandy soil, like if you're in San Francisco or Alameda, if your soil is really sandy, okay? You can use the sprays. It's really okay. Now, I'd like to dispel a myth that's out there that says that I hear people say often that I have sandy soil, so my plants need more water. Is this true? Plants in sandy soil need more water than plants in clay soil? Yes. Right, no. It's not true. Plants in sandy soil need more frequent watering. They don't need more water. Plants, no matter what they're in, no matter what medium they're in, plants need the same amount of water. They need it more frequently in sand and less frequently in clay. Okay, so that's how that works. It's not more water in sandy soil, it's more frequent watering. Also, new plants with very small root zones, those need more frequent watering. So we have two things that drive the frequency of the waterings. That is the soil. If it's sandy soil, almost every day in the summer, if not every day. If there isn't much of a root ball, you plant those little jumbo packs. If you don't water those 2 or 3 times a day, they're gone in the middle of the summer, right? Almost no root zones on those. So the smaller the root zone, the more frequent the watering as well. Those valley oaks out in on the other side of the tunnel, out in Contra Costa County, those do so well. Are they drinking water? Do they need water, those valley oaks, in the summer? Yeah, everybody needs water. But they don't need supplemental water because their roots are down deep enough in clay soil that they've got plenty of water to get them through the dry season. They're adapted to that. All right. Install check valves. That means just try to keep those sprinklers from emptying out when you turn the system off. We've all seen that. The sprinklers stop and they go gush, gush, gush until all of the pipes empty out on the sidewalk. Install a check valve. Check valves will stop that from happening. And some sprinklers actually have those built into them. And then make sure there is no overspray. Make sure that all of the sprinklers are spraying where they're supposed to spray. All right. So the first thing on that list was make sure the pressure is right. And this is one, these two slides, this one and the next slide, are so poignant. I stole these from a Hunter rep because it was just amazing to see this. And the percentage of sprinkler zones that I see out there that have pressure regulation on them is maybe 1% of what I see out there. And sprinklers are supposed to have pressure regulation, but people just don't know it, okay? So if you're going to choose spray, you really need to get that pressure correct. And by correct, I mean usually 30 PSI. And the MP rotators, they want 40 PSI. All right. So this is really a great, well, we're talking about efficient irrigation, and that's what we're all about these days. That's why I'm standing here. It's because it's all about efficient irrigation. Now this photo shows that fixed spray that I showed you earlier. It just blasts the water out. This is a 12-foot radius, and it's a semicircle, 180 degrees, half a circle arc. It shows you on the asphalt the pattern that sprinkler sprays. Now watch this. This is at incorrect pressure. It's the same sprinkler. Can you see how the spray is really, and how the pattern has just gone totally south? I mean, the pattern is hardly not there. So, and this is just at 15 PSI higher than it's supposed to be. Okay, so what happens is your sprinklers are supposed to be dispensing the water at a certain pressure. At higher pressures, what happens is that water atomizes. And now you've got a misting system instead of a sprinkler system. You don't have drops, you have mist. And what happens with mist in even the slightest breeze? It's gone. It's watering your neighbor's yard. Okay? So pressure regulation is really, really important.
You can kind of see that too. You can see that it's hitting the side, hitting that one side, but not the other side.
You can tell which way the wind was blowing that day, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yes?
Is there a way for the home gardener to test our PSI, or does that have to be done professionally?
Yeah. What were you going to say?
Well, you can get a gauge.
You can get a gauge.
A hose.
Yes.
It's very easy to do.
Yes, you can get a gauge that you can attach to your hose bib, and then it'll tell you what your pressure is. But I would pretty much guarantee you that if you have decent pressure in your shower, you have too much pressure for your sprinklers. I can pretty much guarantee that. Yeah, because generally houses have around 60 PSI. I've seen some houses with as high as 110. Yeah, so that's too much for a sprinkler system. It's really too much. Yeah. And yes, you can check it. And if you have a gardener or somebody you know who has a gardening service or is a landscaper or a contractor or anything, you can ask them to check the pressure. Another thing you can do is call the fire department. Give them your address and ask them what your static pressure is on your property. Static pressure. That's the pressure that's just pushing against that fire hydrant and wanting to get loose. All right, the fire department knows what the static pressure is at all their hydrants. So that's a really good way to go. And if your house is fairly close to a fire hydrant, you can be pretty sure that your pressure is pretty much what they say it is at the fire hydrant. Okay?
In purchasing a pressure regulator, does it matter what your starting pressure is?
I'm sorry, say that again?
If you're purchasing a pressure regulator, does it matter what the starting pressure is? Do you
Okay.
need to know that before you buy one?
Okay, well, houses will usually incorporate this plumber's pressure regulator. Some of you have probably seen this. It's a brass pressure regulator. It runs about $80. These are usually put on your house line. And these are adjustable. But for your sprinkler valves, there are pressure regulators that are not adjustable. It just tells the system, these are two irrigation valves here. This is the sprinkler valve, and this is the drip valve. Drip because I have a filter here also. And they both have pressure regulators on them. And this is a pressure regulator that is 30 psi, but it's not adjustable. There are other strategies for sprinklers. You don't have to just put your pressure regulator here, because there are sprinklers that have them built in now. So if you're putting in new sprinklers, then you can buy the ones that have the pressure regulation built in. That's the best way to go, the absolute best way to go. Okay. All right, that's spray. Should you choose drip? I chose this photo off the internet because I like it because it shows a nice grid. I put a little note. Usually I have a little note on here that says, boy, I hope he's going to put more plants in. Because this a drip grid will water 100% of the soil. Okay? It will water 100% of the soil. It is effectively like a spray system. It's doing the same thing that we're asking spray systems to do. This is really good if you have ground cover and you would like to coax those roots out on the ground cover, because roots really will not go through dry soil to get to moist. They really want to have that moist soil to go to. So if you have ground cover, it's a really good idea to have a grid like this. And a lot of times people will put in a grid, or they'll see something like this and they'll say, boy, look at that coverage, it doesn't look very good. That's not 100% coverage. Well, you know what? If you dig down, you'll find 100% coverage. Because what happens, what's the first thing to act on a drip of water when it comes out of a tube? What's the first law, physical law that acts on it? Gravity. Right. So what happens is the water comes out of the tube, goes down into the soil, and then the soil starts wicking it out. When it gets in there, it wicks it out sideways. We call this capillary action in the soil. So it wicks it out. And then what's happening also is that when the sun is blazing on the top of that soil, it's going to dry the water up really quickly, so that the water that is down in there is going out. And I think I have a slide on here that shows one drip emitter, how far out it'll go, and it's 5 feet plus. Okay, so each of those emitters, if this system is left on close to an hour, each of these emitters will go out about 5 feet diameter. That's what they say.
In clay.
It takes a little longer in clay soil because
You wouldn't do that in sand.
in sand, no, you're right. Yeah, it would have to. Yeah, in sand it goes down and goes down. It doesn't go out very much. Yeah. In sandy soil, if it is showing a 1 foot ring on top, it's 1 foot all the way down basically. In clay soil, if it's showing 1 foot on top, it's 4 feet underground. Okay? So it's really different. If it's clay loam, which is in the middle of sandy and clay soil, if it's showing 1 foot on top, it's about 2 feet underground. All right. So for drip systems, we have, what I showed you in that last slide was a grid, and that covers 100% of the soil. Now what I've depicted here, that kind of looks like a grid too, doesn't it? Well, it doesn't have to be. Basically what this does is this makes sure that all of the tubing runs on both sides of every plant. And then you can either have, now each of you has the drip tubing in your hand. Hopefully you've got a brown one. And though that brown tubing is called Netafim, N-E-T-A-F-I-M, Netafim tubing. It's got the emitters actually built into the tubing. This is a really nice one to use. No moving parts to break. Netafim, N-E-T-A-F-I-M. They are based in Israel. That's where drip irrigation comes from. It has the emitters built in. Now with something like this, these are sparse plantings. The tubing comes with the emitters every 12 inches, or 18 inches, or 24 inches. It comes in 3 different denominations. It also comes in different gallonage, gallons per hour. So we have 12-inch, this is emitter spacing, 12-inch, 18, and 24-inch spacing. And then we have the emitters, the actual flow, the water, the amount of water that comes out of the emitters, we measure it in gallons per hour. Whereas with sprinklers that blast the water out, we measure it in gallons per minute. All right? So the Netafim comes in 0.4, 0.6, and 0.9. It's kind of hard to get the 0.4. Mainly they have 0.6 and 0.9 in the irrigation stores. You can order the 0.4. 0.4 makes for long watering windows.
There's 0.26 also. 0.26.
Yeah.
That's really hard.
Have you used it?
No.
Yeah, as Sherry says, they have one now that is 0.26, and boy, I would like to see that work, because that's a mighty small hole, mighty small hole. And these actually, the ones that you're holding, they actually flush as they open. The emitters that are built in, as it opens, it flushes any debris that's in there. So, have you had any problems with Netafim clogging? I haven't seen them clog either. So that old problem with emitters clogging, that's not really an option with this. And we recommend very highly that you flush often. You flush the system often. You have ends of the system that you just open up, turn the zone on, and just let it flush. Okay. So we make sure, now you can run this all around the garden, making sure that the tubing is on both sides of the plants, and then you can physically put in little emitters, if they're not built into the tubing, put in these little emitters where you need them. So we call that blank tubing. It's usually black, but not always. The blank tubing. And you could actually, in this situation, run the blank tubing all the way around, figure out how many emitters each of these plants gets, and then just pop the emitters in. Okay. And there are ways to figure out how many emitters. All right. This is what I was talking earlier about, how they say what the actual wetted area is of a drip emitter. And I believe this is when it's left on for an hour. Okay? So in clay soil, it's going out 5 to 7 feet. And, by the way, I recommend, if you have clay soil, not to go any higher with your emitters than 0.6 gallons per hour. Okay? Because the ones that are higher, the 0.9, 2.0, anything higher than that, the water's just going to run away. Unless you can contain the water. Build a little well, whatever. Yeah, sure.
What is that profile if I put like a little 4-inch container, plant that's got a small root zone?
Uh-huh.
It's dry right up in that little, first 3 inches. Does it do this? Or does
Of the
it
emitter
spread
itself, the water coming out of the emitter, you mean? Yeah, sure.
I think I know what. So is the soil around the plant wet?
So if I'm not right next to an emitter,
Okay.
sometimes it seems like that, or maybe the first 2 inches might be a little bit dry away from,
Uh-huh.
here.
Okay. There's something that's called a soil interface issue. And with new plants especially, I always recommend that an emitter goes on each side of the plant. Say the plant's right here, and you just planted the plant. Put an emitter, one of those emitters, in the soil that the plant came in. Because what happens is, if we were to put an emitter out there and out there, because when you look at this, hey, it's going to go 5 feet, that plant will get watered easily, no problem. Well, if it's a new plant, it's coming in with a different soil than your native soil in your garden. And the way water acts in soil is that it has to saturate the soil that it dripped into, and then it will move into a different soil. It'll move across that interface, we call it. So that's why with new plants, because those two soils are so different, the one that the plant came in and the one that's in your yard, put one of those emitters at the base of the plant. Now, that also, for the future, you definitely want to pull that away from the base of the plant, okay? Don't leave it there for years and years, because then you can get what they call crown rot. We really don't want that water for a long time right there at the crown or the base of the plant. It can get crown rot if you do that. But mainly we're doing that so that that plant, that brand new plant, we can be assured that it'll get the water it needs. So Sharon, I'd try that.
Okay, I did that, and it's working where I did not the non-grid system, I have actual emitters going on where the root ball is.
Uh-huh.
Good deal.
Beautiful.
The grid system, though, I'm having some trouble with, we put in a new plant.
Yeah, and that's what's happening. It's that soil interface issue, I believe. Yeah, sure.
I have another recommendation. Medical, I don't know what the name of it is, but they have a little, that little device that you put on the emitter, and it's got the quarter-inch spaghetti.
Yes.
Have you seen that? So you have an emitter, and it's just this little device that goes on it, and it takes the water from the emitter. Maybe somebody has one. No, it's a little different. And it takes it out in little spaghetti. I'll show you one.
You mean connected to the net?
Yes, it connects to the emitter. And it sends that water through a quarter-inch spaghetti line. And then you can put it right to the base of the plant.
Yeah.
And then after it's developed its roots,
And
then you can take that off
Well,
and save it and use it a different time.
what she held up there, that's one, you could certainly do
You
that.
could do it that way too.
Yeah.
But
Hold
then
it-
you're
hold it
punching
up
in.
again, what
Yeah.
you've got there. Can you hold it up again? The person who has the little quarter-inch
Oh,
that's
this
connected.
is the one you held up a
Oh,
moment
sorry.
ago with the
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was
emitter off of the
Oh, that
half
one,
inch, is
yeah.
that it?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of like that. That one's punched in.
Yes. Oh, but it's something else. Is it something that you hook up to Netafim?
Yeah, it's a Netafim product.
Oh.
I'll show you.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
It fits in the actual emitter.
Right.
And then it extends that through
Right.
tubing, yeah.
Right,
Okay.
right.
So there are strategies.
Yes.
If you were to put in a grid, there are strategies for getting that water actually to the plant. All right? And also, if you're going to be running the drip tubing around, it's a really good idea. When I say grid, some people want to go, and I used to do this in the beginning. La, la, la. Your lines, your drip tubing lines are lined up like soldiers. La, 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 la. But if you do that and you have to move anything in the future, it's really hard to move anything. So what you want to do is snake it. Make those really lovely, sexy curves on the ground. It's beautiful. I never want to cover them up. They're so beautiful. So just curve it around. That way you can move things at will when you need to. And you will be moving them, most likely, as the plant grows. We need to grow our drip system as the plants grow. That's why I like the strategy of putting in a loose grid to begin with. That way the tubes are there. Your water is sitting there ready to be used as the plant grows. It's in the tube. It doesn't have an emitter on it yet. And by the way, this Netafim tubing that I passed out to you, you can actually plug those emitters. Some of you may have a little brown ring around your tube. Can you hold it up if you've got a, yeah, some of you have a little brown ring around the tube. Those are emitter plugs. So if you wanted to, you could run it around. If it's a new garden, run it around and plug those emitters until you need them. When the plant grows big enough, take the plug off. All right? And we always recommend that you put your drip lines on top of the soil. Don't bury them. Many, many problems burying drip tubing. They used to tell us to put it at least 6 inches down. The gophers will go through it in a second. Put it on top of the soil and cover it with mulch. And if you have problems with wild animals chewing on your drip system, just put a little plastic bowl underneath one of your emitters. Give them some water. They want the water in the tubing, not the tube. They're not after polyethylene, I can guarantee that. Okay? And I know of a few people who have tried that and said it works like a charm. Just give them some water. All right. So you don't need to read all these words. You'll get this later. Basically what this says is that when we have our weather factor, remember I told you that how much water a plant needs is a moving target, and it's because it depends on the weather, the plant type, and the size of the plant. With that weather factor, our numbers that we get, the weather stations pipe these numbers to us, okay? And that number they're piping to us is a number for turf grass, very, very well watered and thriving, okay? This is our reference. So, if we're talking about a high water use plant, we're going 80 to 100% of that reference number. And you'll see what I mean a little bit later. A moderate water use plant is about half that. And a low water use plant is about a quarter that. So if you go to the nursery and you're looking at plants and you know that you're looking at some low water use plants and some high water use plants, you know that those plants need about a quarter of the water that those plants need. All right? It's a really nice reference to have in your mind. We try very hard not to put low water use plants next to high water use plants. All right? I see it done all the time. They look so beautiful. Japanese bloodgrass next to dahlias or some other kind of succulent. It is gorgeous. Gorgeous, but not a good idea. One of those plants will suffer, guaranteed at some point, because they have very different water needs. Okay. All right. We can actually skip over this because this just, well, no, actually, I won't skip over it. I'll tell you just the gist of what this says. And that is that when we want to figure out how to put the emitters on our plants, when we know what the water uses are, we know that these plants are low, these plants are moderate. What we do is we start with those low plants. That is our reference point. We start with the low. And if I decide to give that low water use plant 2 emitters, how many emitters do I give that moderate water use plant? 4. Excellent, because it's double the amount of water. All right, so this is just kind of an on-the-fly thing. If you know that it's low and you know that it's moderate, that's an on-the-fly thing. Some of you still may be saying, well, how the heck do I know whether it's low or moderate? We will get to that. All right, there's an example of sparse planting, and this is a case where you would want to, if you wanted to really just dive in there and know how much each plant, how much water each plant needs, you can dive in there and know it. This is a good candidate for what we call point source drip, which is not a grid. Okay, this is just taking the amount of water to each plant that it needs, and that's it. Plant to plant to plant, not a grid that waters 100% of the soil, everything the same. Yes?
Do you ever use the 1/4-inch tube that has the emitters built in and circle the plants?
Yes, I do. I use the 1/4-inch tubing mainly in pots. The 1/4-inch tubing can be problematic in that the connectors that connect it to the bigger tubing, if you step on that, it comes loose. It's a lot of moving parts. It's things that can come disconnected or break. So mainly I try to stick with the 1/2-inch tubing, which is what you all have. That's 1/2-inch tubing. Some people call it 5/8. Sometimes it is 5/8, but we just call it half. That's our generic number for it. It's 1/2-inch tubing. I try to use that as much as possible. And then in pots, we'll use, because it can make a nice little tight circle, we'll use the 1/4-inch in pots. All right. Okay, dense plantings. This is a grid. The soldiers are all in a row. If your plant material is not very forgiving, like turf grass is, now for instance, this would be a good strategy for subsurface drip, which some people will do in grass, a lawn, turf grass. I've done it a couple of times, but it's kind of crazy making because you never really know if it's working unless the grass starts to die. It does work though. I know a lot of people who have done it. It's a nice strategy if you're willing to trust. All right. If you choose drip, filter and pressure regulator, please. Flush the system regularly, as I said. Application rate, infiltration rate. Try not to mix application rates. Okay, so we won't really get into much of the technical aspects of this, but you will have this information available to you. All right. We ask that you do not combine these on a single zone. And this is a very regular practice because they sell the parts for you to do it. Ow! And we often, when we have drip, we often have an area that we feel is not getting enough water. Just go down, buy micro sprays, plug them in, good to go. But see, the fact is that these guys dispense water at a rate of at least 20 times more than this does. So if the system is on long enough for this to do its job, this guy has done its job 20 times already. So it's a really huge water waster is to put these two guys together on the same zone. All right? Now, I love the new technology that's out because there's something new that's out. I don't have to say no, 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 no anymore. Please don't do this. I can say please do this. And that is, Laura's gone. Okay, well, these nozzles here, these guys up here, those are called Rainbird SQ nozzles. SQ. They used to be called XPCN, but nobody could remember the name. They're fairly new. And they are actually micro spray nozzles that you can put on a drip system and combine it with drip emitters because it actually dispenses water at a similar rate as the drip emitters do. This is very exciting here because oftentimes in the real world we do have to mix spray and drip. That's the real world. Okay? So if you can handle it, use these SQ nozzles. You can't get them at hardware stores, Home Depot, Lowe's. You have to get them at irrigation stores, and they're made by Rainbird. And one of the handouts that I'll be providing that they'll upload to the website will actually have these parts that I'm talking about, and it'll have the names of them, and it'll say who makes them, so it'll be easier for you to get hold of these parts. And I do welcome you contacting me too. If I talked about something that you later want more clarification on, feel free to email me or call me. I'm fine with that. All right, so you can combine these. All right. How much water does any given plant need? We're going to go through this fairly quickly because this is the technical part of it. This is why they don't teach irrigation and scheduling in the landscape architecture programs and the horticulture programs. Weather, plants, and the area. When we say weather, that changes every day. It can change hourly. It changes from month to month or week to week. The days get shorter. The days get longer. It's overcast one day, the weather. The plants, that is really, is it a low water use plant? Is it a moderate? Is it a high? We also have a classification called very low, and many of the California natives are very low. And then the area, that's the size of the plant. Smaller plants need less water. All right. Individual plants. The water for individual plants is actually measured in gallons, whereas in planted areas, it's measured in inches. To confuse it even more for you, okay? Just when you think you've got it, it wiggles and runs away. All right? So gallons, inches, what the heck does inches mean? That's not, we don't have the time to go through that. And there, remember I wrote down that application rate? I said it's so many inches per hour. That's the inches thing. And we have a way to convert that to gallons. It's a simple formula. All right. So this is the major weather factor that changes every day. The four main components of it are solar radiation. That's the biggest component of how we figure out how much water a plant needs. Because you know when the sun shines, the plant's doing something, right? Photosynthesis, something like that. It's doing something. It's moving. It's it's using resources. It's using water. It's using a lot of things. Wind is a huge factor. It's not as huge as solar radiation, but wind can dry out plants tremendously. And then we have air temperature and relative humidity. Where do we find the weather? These weather numbers, they come from something called CIMS, and this is on your irrigation resources sheet. CIMS, C-I-M-I-S. It stands for California Irrigation Management Information Service. It's a website. You can go on there anytime and find out what your weather factor number is. We call it ET number, is every day, if you so choose. Another way we get it is through the California State Model Ordinance. You can find this online as well. This is that law that I said went into effect on January 2010. They have the weather numbers, historical weather numbers that you can find there. This Landscape Plants for California Gardens, this is a terrific book. This is an awesome book by Bob Perry. How many of you know about this book? Oh boy, this is an amazing book. He's actually got 3/4 of this book free online on his website as a PDF. The only part he didn't put online for free is the compendium part. But so much of it he offers for free, and it's really wonderful. He classifies plants too as low, moderate, and high water use plants. All right, and Bob Perry, his plant factors, that's what that is. WCALs. The WCALs list is our main information source for whether plants are low, moderate, or high water use plants. WCALs stands for Water Use Classification of Landscape Species. It should be California landscape species, but they didn't want to put 2 C's in there. They only wanted to put 1. It was already a long word that nobody understood. So this is online. You don't have to have a hard copy. You can look up plants to find out what the water use is, the water use value is of any plant. It is actually a little lacking. Some of our, 200 or 300 of our landscape plants are not in here because the last time this was updated was 1999. There is a task force that has been formed by the Department of Water Resources that is working on updating it as we speak. And I actually get to be part of that. I'm very excited about that.
Did it get funded?
Yeah, it got funded. Yeah. Awesome, huh?
That's great.
Yeah. Okay, that's how we find out whether a plant is very low, low, moderate, or high. Some of you might be saying, well, I don't know the names of my plants. What I recommend you do is, I think that on my irrigation resources list, I have listed, I think, Master Gardeners, APLD, which is the Association of Professional Landscape Designers, and I think I put CLCA, Landscape Contractors Association. Call in an expert, okay? Pay somebody for an hour of their time. Call Sherry. Call Sharon. Pay somebody for an hour of their time. You've got 2 landscape architects sitting in this room. What I like to say is I like to show up and show off. You know, and we love to consult. Don't we love to consult? Yeah, just go in and what's this plant? What's that plant? What would look good here? Consultation is we all love to do it. Yeah. So I highly recommend that is to call somebody in to help you out with this stuff. All right. Well, now the moment of truth. Here we go. The Dudleya. 2-foot diameter. How much water in mid-July? How many people said 0.6 gallons a week? Anybody close? 0.5. 0.5, look at that.
2.
Yeah. 0.2?
2.
Or 2 gallons a week?
2.
Okay. Interesting, huh? 0.6 gallons a week. That's half a gallon in a whole week in mid-July. So what happens is, this is science, okay? This is science. I came up with that number using a scientific formula, a mathematical formula that I'm going to show you guys, all right? This plant, actually, it's one of those reduced summer water plants, and it'll show up in cracks of rocks. But like Sherry says, mainly it's on the coast, or near the coast, where you've got the fog that's helping it out. Like the redwood trees, they're getting helped out by the fog. They basically water themselves because they're in the fog belt. Yes?
But there's also the difference between whether you just planted it and whether it's been there for quite a while.
Definitely.
Once they're established, they really need a lot.
Okay, so this is part of that myth that I was talking about later. When it's established, it doesn't need so much water. Okay, so I'd just like to add a word to that sentence. When it's established, it doesn't need so much supplemental water.
No.
Yeah, because as it gets bigger and gets established, it needs water. It still needs it.
It's just getting it.
Exactly. It's getting it because its roots are down deep enough, or its strategy, because it's adapted. If it just showed up somewhere, chances are really good that it's the conditions of that area will sustain that plant without us intervening at all. No supplemental water. So what you do have to realize is that this is math and science here. And sometimes we'll work all this stuff out with our math and science, and somebody will say, wow, I give my plants way less than that, and they look great. And I say, you go. Because this is the math and science of it. It's not always the real world. But you know what it does? Is it gets us in the ballpark. Whereas before we knew this stuff and we're actually able to teach it and speak it and use it, we were not in the ballpark. We weren't even in the same city, you guys. Really. We overwater our gardens by at least 200%. Some people say we overwater them by 4 or 5 times. I've seen gardens that are overwatered 4 or 5 times, and the plants are going, yeah, I know this. And sure, they look great. But if you were to do this math and science and then see that number, oh my gosh, 0.6 gallons a week. I've been giving it 4. Well, maybe that means I can pull back on the water. And that's usually what it does mean. Okay? All right, and then early September, 0.48. Did people lower their numbers for September?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, so you intuitively knew that. The days are shorter. It's not cooler, right? Our September and October are not cool months. They're hot months. But the daylight, the sunlight is so much shorter. And remember I said that's our main factor is solar radiation or sunlight. The days are so much shorter that the plants are not, they're not doing their thing. They're not doing their stuff. So actually September is 80% of mid-July. All right, so our gardens are only using 80% of the water they would use in mid-July, or what we call peak time. Yes, ma'am?
I was thinking peak time was fall for a lot of natives. I'm not sure if that's-
That's the peak time to plant, right? We call that's our planting time for natives. Yeah. It's, and Sherry, tell us why fall is the best time to plant natives.
Well, you're starting to get some rain.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting, the days are a lot cooler, and the days are a lot shorter.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. So then we don't need to use so much water, and the plants aren't put through as much stress
Right.
when the days are colder.
That's right, and
Yeah.
you're going into a whole rainy season.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. And Mother Nature is helping us establish our gardens when we plant them in the fall. Okay, next plant, Ceanothus, 5-foot diameter. Did anybody come anywhere near 3.6 gallons a week? Hey, all right.
I wrote 4 down.
4? That's very close. Anybody else? 3.6 gallons a week? That doesn't seem much for a 5-foot diameter tree, does it? That's pretty good. It's a low water use plant for you. September, 2.9. Anybody get anywhere near that? Sherry, great.
2.
And yeah, excellent. All right, the last one, the heuchera, 2-foot diameter. Anybody come anywhere near 1.4 gallons per week in July? 1.2, that's great.
No, 2 gallons.
Oh, 2 gallons, that's still close. Yeah. Okay, 1.4 gallons a week. And then 80% of that for September is 1.1 gallons per week. So what you can see here is if you were willing to go to this length, to actually look at each plant in your yard and look at its size, look up its water use, you can know how much water each plant needs. And then you can manage everything else from there. And we don't really have the time to go into how to manage that. But if you were to attend any of those drip classes that I'll be doing, we'll be going into that more in depth because those are 3-hour workshops. All right. Yeah, actually, we're almost done. This is working out very nicely. We're supposed to stop at 8:30. This just talks about hydrozone. I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to go into it in great depth. But a hydrozone is when we have the choice, what we try to do is group the plants together in zones. Now, when I say zone, I mean what this valve is watering. If this valve is going off over there to that section of the room and it's watering that, that's a hydrozone. Hydrozone. Okay, so we try to group the plants together that have similar water needs. Similar cultural needs, sun and shade, similar soil needs, microclimate needs. That's what hydrozone is about. All right. This is a hydrozone at a native garden that's on the Bringing Back the Gardens tour. I give a talk every year. It's a friend of mine's garden. And this hydrozone has very low, moderate, and high water use plants. It has 4 water uses in one zone. It breaks all the rules, and everybody's thriving and beautiful. It's not the greatest photo. It's washed out, but that's where real life breaks the rules. And we find that real life often breaks the rules, but it's really nice to start with the rules. Because like I said earlier, it gets you in the ballpark. All right. I love this one. All right, and then we'll end with this one.